I'm Dr. Gail Gross. My guest today is a renowned spiritual leader, author, and editor of over 30 books on spirituality and mysticism. Andrew Harvey was born in India and lived there until he was 9 years old, a period in his life that he credits with shaping his vision of the inner unity of all religions. While studying at Oxford, he became the youngest person ever to be awarded the Fellow of All Souls College, England's highest academic honor. Since 1977, he lived in London, Paris, New York, San Francisco, and Las Vegas, where he has devoted time to studying a variety of all religions, including Hinduism, Buddhism, and Christianity. His book, Mary's Vineyard, Daily Readings, Meditations, and Revelations, earned him the Benjamin Franklin Award and the Mind, Body, Spirit Award. He also co-authored the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, and more recently, The Direct Path. He was the subject of a BBC documentary in 1993 called The Making of a Mystic, and today devotes his studies and writings to explaining the direct path to God. Andrew Harvey, welcome to the program. It is an honor for me to have you here, a privilege. You are truly one of the greatest leaders of our time in the world of spirituality, a time when it's so needed. Tell us how your journey began. What is your story?
I was born in India, and I think that's the key to my story. Because being born in India is being born in a naturally sacred world in which all things are revered as sacred. I was born of British parents in India, and I think being born in India gives you three main perceptions. First of all, that God includes horror and terror and suffering as well as light and glory and peace. Secondly, that the entire world, everything in the world, is blessed and holy, from the tiniest flea to the most extraordinary and brilliant elephant. And I think that the other perception that it gave me was that all religions are different facets of one overwhelming truth. Because I had a Hindu cook, a Muslim driver, a Catholic nanny, and Protestant parents. And very early on in my life, I intuited that in essence, all the religions were trying to lead people to the same place of revelation.
Yes, you know, I was a very close friend of Swami Satchidananda.
Yes.
And he always said, paths are many, and truth is one. And therefore he honored and valued all religions in their purest form as bringing the truth to everyone, peace, compassion, and love.
This is one of the great achievements of Hinduism. And in saying that, he's really saying the deepest truth about his own religion.
Yes.
One of the visions of Hinduism which I love, and this goes to the core of what I learned as a child,
yes,
is something that Ramakrishna said. He said that
yes,
think of God as a mother, and think of revelation as a big white fish, and think of the human family as 6 or 7 extremely demanding, quarrelsome children of the mother. And think of the mother then saying, well, what I've got to do is to cook the white fish in different ways for my different children.
yeah.
My mentor, and the man who changed my life, and I'm sure we'll be talking about him, Father Bede Griffiths, used to hold up his hand like this, and he used to say, think, this is Christianity, this is Taoism, this is Buddhism, this is Hinduism, these are all the native religions. And they seem very different, don't they, on the hand? And they are, because there are different dogmas, there are different ways of formulating the absolute. But when you come to the center of the hand,
I love this.
you have the inmost experience that all the mystics of all the traditions are looking for. And that experience is an experience of non-dual identity with the entire cosmos. And that experience is the truth of all sentient beings, of all human beings, and it is to have that experience of non-dual identity, of deep, deep, rapturous, blissful, conscious unity with all existence.
Yes.
And the deep truths of all of the mystical traditions enshrine that experience and help us get to it. And one of the most glorious things about being alive now is that if you really want this experience, if you really want to know who you truly are, what the universe really is, and your relationship to the universe, you have before you an extraordinary array of mystical practices from all of the different traditions that you can use in your own way to come to this realization and live from it. This is a terrifying time and a wonderful time.
In Buddhism, we always talk about the Sutra path, which is the oral tradition of Buddha. And of course, there are many Buddhas. We think of there as being one teacher. And yet, what the interest is, what we're really told is that divine is in all of us. There's God in the godliness in all of us, the soul in all of us.
Your Christ nature is as good as Christ's nature, your Buddha nature.
And he said to his apostles, of course, go out and heal as I've healed. It's there for all of us. Yes. We all have that potential. Tell me your vision of the rebirth of the feminine, the end of the warrior, and some kind of marriage or integration of really a hopeful, total, individuated world as well as individuated individual.
Well, my deepest belief, and it's actually been my inmost experience, is that we are now, as a human race, entering what I hope will be the era of the sacred marriage, in which the integration between the two sides of God, what you could call the masculine and the feminine sides of God, will take place in the human on every level. And so what will happen is an integration of a vision of heaven with a vision of a renovated and transformed earth, the deepest truths of the feminine with the deepest truths of the masculine, the holiness of the body with the holiness of the soul, and a deep mystical practice with radical action to create a wholly new way of acting in the world, which I call mystical activism.
And you see the world right now in an apocalyptic moment.
The world is in the apocalypse, but the apocalypse is not what everybody believes it to be, a terminal situation. It is actually
a force for change.
It's a birth process.
Yes.
And in the mystical process, which I've partly been through, you go through what is called a dark night of the soul, in which you lose all your moorings and you're stripped of all of your certainties and all your illusions are shattered and you suffer horribly. But if you know what's happening, you know that this suffering is not the end. It is actually the preparation for a wholly new level of consciousness. The world is now going through a communal dark night of the soul, what I call the dark night of the species.
Yes.
It is that I believe the divine is presenting a mirror to humanity. When it gets humanity's attention, and I think humanity is now listening, because terrible crisis makes you listen, the divine turns the mirror to the right, and the mirror goes dark, and a seven-headed beast of the apocalypse appears in it, which we all have to look at. And very simply, those seven heads are the following: a terrible busyness, an appalling, hectic busyness and anxiety, which prevent people from really getting to the core of their divine knowledge and their divine nature. And if you combine that, a population explosion with a environmental holocaust, with fundamentalism, with weapons of mass destruction, with addiction to technology, with mass media that trivializes everything, and this busyness that prevents self-recognition at the deepest level.
No contemplation.
You have no contemplation, no peace of mind.
Yes.
You have the recipe for what's going on.
Right.
But once the divine has really forced you to look at that and really got your attention, then the divine will smile and the mirror will turn. And you'll see what I call the golden mirror, which my life has been dedicated to staring into.
Yes.
And what I see in the golden mirror are 7 stars of the new birth of humanity and of the birth of the sacred marriage on earth. And I see in those stars as the following. I see those stars. The first one is the crisis itself. The crisis is a vast opportunity for us to face our shadow as a human race, and also to face the divine that lives within us and start calling upon it to renovate everything. The second thing I see is that the technology that is very devastating in many ways is also offering all kinds of new possibilities to humanity. And third, the fact that the mass media, terrible though it is, has turned up with, we're talking on it, and has turned up with the whole marvelous new tool of the internet. Imagine a world galvanized by the real information on the internet to start setting mystical activism in purpose.
Imagine.
The 4th star is something that I know you care about deeply, and you know I care about deeply, which is that now all of the revelations of all of the mystical traditions are available to all humanity. They've been translated. And not only the revelations are available, and this is so crucial, but the actual sacred technology, the visualizations, the meditations that before were kept secret are now available to all human beings at a moment of immense crisis, to give them the way to experience their divine nature so that they can go out fearlessly and transform apocalypse into resurrection.
Yes.
The fifth great facet is that in non-violence, in the work of Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and Nelson Mandela and, of course, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we've been given a tool of political action rooted in soul force that really can slowly transform almost impossible situations. Yes. And this brings me to the last 2 points, which fundamentally are one point, which is that the divine really wants this great change to happen and is showering humanity with knowledge and bliss and grace and revelation. Anyone who really wants to wake up now will be helped to find whatever they need, whichever aspect of whatever revelation or religion or tradition they need to wake up. The divine has an agenda. That agenda is the transfiguration of the human race, the birth of the new humanity, the birth of the sacred marriage. And what I would really love to say to you is that the clue, which is point number 6, is the return of the divine feminine.
Right.
And she's coming back in all kinds of ways. She's coming back theologically and mystically, but she's also coming back in holistic medicine, in visions of cooperation in business, in the great resurgence of feminine rights, in the great resurgence of gay rights. All of these ways show the mother's return, and that leads to the 7th point, which is the fact is that the mother is the force that we're going to be drawing upon to change this whole thing around. And I just want to give you one example. In the worst year of my life, and it was a terrible year, I left my guru because I no longer agreed with her. I blessed her, but I left her.
Which was Mother Meera.
Mother Meera. And terrible things happened. There were death threats and God knows what. And I've gone past this, but it was a bad year. And at one moment, I felt desperate. And we went to worship Mary. That day, I bought a card, a Mexican card. I love kitsch, and I bought a Mexican card of her with an open shirt and a heart. I put it on my desk. I went out of the room, and I came back, and the desk was covered with what I thought was water, and it wasn't water. It was actually rose perfume that had poured from the heart, and that heart smelled for 3 months. Many people smelled that heart. That rose water was a divine miracle. And I turned the card around, and what it said is, whatever happens, I will be with you, and I will protect you. And I realized I was getting that message from myself in that time, but also that the mother was saying that to the whole of humanity. Don't get terrified by the darkness. Choose the divine light within you. Know that I am here. Know that the very extent of the darkness is something that I'm allowing to help you wake up, and know that I will give you every strength, every truth, every revelation, every passion to help you transform the situation if you really want it.
Yes.
So I'm convinced that we've come to this period when we have to choose very deeply, and that all of the divine will help us do so.
And we're really just choosing God.
Choosing, but we're also choosing the God inside ourselves.
Within.
It's not just the God outside.
The interior truth.
We're choosing the truth of the mystical traditions, which have all said to us in different ways, you are a part of God. You were born not with original sin, but with original blessing. The divine consciousness is your birthright. All beings are holy. The world is holy. You're living in a holy place. Get on with it. Have the feast. Be just. Feed the poor. Make beautiful buildings that express the radiance of God. Have hospitals built for people who can't afford it. Live the life of God, which is the life of compassion and the life of justice, and have the feast that the Father Mother has prepared for you from the beginning of time. And just stop believing your victim selves, your neurotic selves, your self-hating selves.
The contracted self, the closed down. In fact, your great Christian teacher, Bede, Griffiths, how did you find him? In fact, you left the guru consciousness.
I left the guru consciousness. Actually, I met Bede just before I left the Guru Consciousness.
Tell us that story, Andrew.
Well, it was a wonderful meeting. It was in 1993, and I left Mira later that year. I was asked by an Australian film director to go and interview Father Bede Griffiths, who was then 86 and living in South India and had his own ashram and was a Catholic monk who'd opened himself to all different traditions. I went to the ashram. I interviewed him for 8 amazing days, and I fell profoundly spiritually in love with him. He changed my life in so many ways, but I think the most important way was that he brought me back to the authentic Christ. And I realized that the vision of Christ that I'd been given in...
was love.
Was love, but also that the Christ is actually the most brilliant and amazing symbol of the sacred marriage we've been talking about.
The integration
The
of
integration.
if you were Jungian, you'd say the anima and animus in all of us.
The masculine and the feminine.
One side can't be disowned, the other can't be.
That's
It has
it.
to be integrated.
This is the core revelation. The core revelation is that God is one, but God uses the opposites to create the world, and that by unifying the opposites within oneself, one can awaken to one's complete divine nature and radiate from that unity a new level of power, completion and energy. And this is so important for this time, because I'm sure you find this. People are terribly dispirited.
Oh, yes.
People are worn out. People are broken down. What I'm trying to
terribly
do in my
afraid.
work, terribly afraid.
Bring them
Bring
past
them
fear.
past fear to a living experience of divine ecstasy,
Which
and
must be
divine
experienced.
energy.
It really can't be articulated. It's an amazing
You can't
thing.
articulate it, but the wonderful thing is that we have the great mystical poets.
Yes,
to
and
help
you
us.
love Rumi,
Rumi.
so that helps me ask you how your path, the story of how it really started in Coimbatore, perhaps, and your mystical experiences, those 3 major breaks that you would call those mystical moments, the aha moments, and then how you actually came to, for example, Rumi as a way to explain who you are, where you are, and how you teach.
Well, I think I was born in India for a purpose, to unify the West and the East within my consciousness.
And say a moment that Coimbatore is near the birthplace of...
Well, Coimbatore is one of the places where
Southern
Shiva
India.
danced, the great god of South India, the great masculine godhead danced. And so I feel that I was born into Shiva's country, Shiva's dancing ground.
And we have to explain that these are just aspects of one God.
Yes,
not
because
people think it's an idolatry.
Right.
And it's really
Hinduism, it has at its core a vision of God as the eternal light, as the eternal one.
That's it.
But all the different aspects of that one's dance are enshrined in these different gods. And that's what's so marvelous about Hinduism.
And, you know, Jung used these aspects, and of course people in meditation use these aspects as merging with the characteristics of the aspect that they have to, in a certain way, incorporate.
If
or
you're
get
looking
rid
for
of.
wisdom, if you're looking for working on the masculine, you go to Shiva. If you want the feminine, go to the goddess.
These are just images.
It's so wonderful, isn't it?
Wonderful
because you
idea.
enter into this dynamic
dance,
heart copulation in a way with the sacred powers.
Yes.
I was born in India, and then I was put through the English system because I had to be trained in the English system. But it was an excruciation. I felt as if I was locked in a refrigerator.
But you did very well at Oxford.
Oh, I overachieved like crazy, yes, and I got this fellowship to All Souls, and that was wonderful, and I was a professor. But one of the most terrible things that can happen to anybody is to get exactly what they wanted. And I got it at 21, and being a fellow of All Souls was very grand and enabled me to meet the Prime Minister and the heads of business and the major artists, and major ballerinas danced on the lawn at midnight. And it was wonderful in one way, but it was also very disheartening because I saw the illusion of the world, and I saw just how rotten and corrupt many of the people who rule the world are. And at 21, that is a devastating thing to feel. So I had a series of inner breakdowns, which culminated in a very unhappy love affair, at which moment I realized that I was starving to death in this gilded cage. And then I decided to go back to India at 25, and that opened up a whole integration of the vanished Indian side of myself. And I had a series of absolutely shattering mystical experiences at 25 when I was living in an ashram by the sea in South India, in Pondicherry, in Sri Aurobindo's ashram, and I was forced to face that my whole education, everything I'd ever learned, was nothing compared to this new reality that was dawning with me. And fundamentally, there were 3 experiences. In the first, I had a dream in which I felt I was in a cloud of voices, and one of the voices said, "I am the beloved, and now you must go down." And I went down, and I fell into my body. So I realized that there was this fundamental connection between
This
the
is
soul and the
so
soul.
Kabbalistic.
Of course, yes, it's the descent in
Descent.
the Tikkun Olam,
Of course,
the healing.
exactly.
The second
and
was
of course,
that I
the
had
Elohim, the divine feminine.
right,
The creator.
because you're part of. The second vision, I really had a vision of light. I was walking back at night by the sea, and everything became white light. And I heard the whole universe chanting Om, and I went back to my hotel room, and I was reading the Upanishads, and I opened the book, and it said, "When you are ready, you will hear the entire universe chanting Om, and you will see the light of the divine presence." And I was petrified,
Yes,
because
of
the
course.
experience was so vast, and it
And
deranged
out of
everything.
control.
Out of control.
Right.
I closed the book and concentrated on sort of
Yes.
eating calmly for a few
Earth,
days.
getting
grounded.
grounded.
And in the third, which has really been the complete dream of my life, I was on a beach again in India, and I saw a figure coming towards me. And this figure was neither male nor female, but both, in white robes, a figure of incredible beauty, so moving and beautiful. And I saw her come towards me, and her came and lay in my lap. And I was so overwhelmed with love for this figure, and I said, "Who are you?" And the figure said to me, "I am you." And then I woke up.
Oh,
and I realized that what I was being shown was the sacred androgyne.
That's right.
The
Everything is
male-female
that's
person
right,
that I'm
together.
trying myself,
Yes.
with all my flaws and faults, to come and
Yes.
represent now.
Yes.
The marriage.
The marriage.
So those three experiences changed everything.
Yes.
And then I went back to try and integrate what I'd learned in India in this Oxford world. And of course it was hopeless, because a kind of
work.
schizophrenia set in.
Yes.
But I was very blessed at that time, because I went to Paris and I discovered the translations by a woman called Eva de Vitré-Meyerowitz in French of Rumi's mystical poetry. And at that moment I realized that what I'd seen in India is something that he just knew with every cell of his body. So Rumi became my friend, my guide, my beloved, always saying to me, "Don't let the rational voices win. There is a great glory here,
Yes.
which you have glimpsed, and I have truly seen for many years, and out of which this great golden torrent of..." And I became obsessed with him, and I studied him, and I translated him, and eventually, actually, I met Eva de Vitré-Meyerowitz and became a great
Really?
friend of hers. Yes.
Really?
Because I lived in Paris, and we met. And out of this meeting, and out of this obsession with Rumi, and out of this experience of his guardianship and his guidance, came all the books that I've written about Rumi. Because
Yes.
Rumi, for me, is the mystical guide for this great
Yes.
Renaissance. Because whether you're a Hindu, whether you're a Christian or a Buddhist, if you're a lover of God, his vision of God as the beloved and his incredible sense of the beauty and passion of the mystical life will inflame you. So
Yes.
at this moment when we're in such danger, we have the return, of course, of Rumi, the Rumification of the world,
isn't that
to give
amazing?
people this inspiration.
And this wonderful book that you've written,
Oh,
this
thank you.
one of these wonderful books, you've written so many wonderful books, A Walk with Four Spiritual Guides. You
Yes.
speak of Krishna,
Yes,
Buddha,
yes.
Buddha as a teacher, in fact, Jesus, and
Yes.
Ramakrishna.
Yes.
And how the message from all of them
Yes.
is the same.
Well, and it's the same, but they all have different aspects of it.
And different ways of communicating.
Different ways of communicating. And which we, at this moment, I believe that it's so important to get the inspiration from every side.
Yes.
I myself don't call myself
anything.
I'm a mystic independent. I revere all the religions, but they've all failed, I think, in the task of unifying humanity.
Fascinating.
There is a transcendent, immanent, mystical revelation, which I know and I'm being born into, and you know. And that's where I like to live. But I also need the inspiration from all of the traditions.
Yes.
I need Krishna's vision of mystical activism. I need Jesus' incredible vision of how to incarnate the sacred passion of God.
And that it's available to everyone.
Everybody.
And you get to the Father by Me, this map, this interior trip. Before we leave, I always ask a question that no one's prepared for. I always ask the defining moment in your life. What was your defining moment?
The most important thing that ever happened to me in my life happened to me when I was 46, and my father was dying in Coimbatore, where I was born, and I went back from San Francisco to be with him. And I spent this amazing week with him, totally beautiful. He was a marvelous, marvelous man, and my heart and his heart merged. And I arrived on Tuesday, and on the Sunday I went to church, and the statue of the Christ at the end of the church came alive. So the most defining moment of my life was that for 15 minutes, with open eyes, I saw the resurrected Christ, and from his heart to my heart poured a lava of molten gold and ripped open my entire chest and poured it into my whole being. And since that moment, that energy of passion and love has been within me. And that moment expanded because I went out of the church absolutely full of the glory of the resurrection. And I saw in a puddle a young man without arms and legs, and I heard the voice of the Christ within me saying, "You must not play with this revelation, because now you must realize that your whole work here is to help end the horrific circumstances that create this misery. Now you must dedicate your whole life to justice and the transformation of the planet and the ending of the horror of the poor."
Oh my. And it's interesting, Mother Teresa had a similar experience.
She
the
was
first
so
moment
holy.
she lifted
Yes.
the leper, she said, "I had to see within that leper the Christ, or I couldn't have gone, and I knew my work could never begin."
And that defining moment, I think, when you see him or meet him, and she did, and so many
Yes.
people do, because he's helping
Yes.
everybody, you realize that the entire purpose of this mystical journey is not just to wake up yourself, but to use that awakening as it grows to just serve and give everything.
Yes.
Rumi said, "You only take across the waters of death what weighs nothing, and what weighs nothing is love."
I love this, Andrew. What a perfect way for us to end the day in a tangible way, the idea of love.
That's it.
You are it, Andrew.
Thank you, darling.
And you're a blessing.
So are you.
Thank you, Andrew.
What you see is what you are.
Thank you, Andrew.
We are PBS.